Hey guys, it's Thermal Grease Monkey here, and I'm back once again. In today's episode, like I said, I wanted to do a little bit of a Halloween themed ish video. A while back, I ended up having to fix somebody's graphics card because it had some thermal issues and whatnot, and I thought to myself, I went, hey, what if I went out on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or some sort of a used marketplace, OfferUp even, and I bought myself a 4 parts or not working GPU and see if I could get it working. So I ended up deciding to pick up a GPU, and after that I went, what if I decide to build a whole system? So this was definitely about a month plus of prep work and buying components that obviously didn't work that I couldn't fix, and putting it all together to build the zombie PC in 2025. So I'll kick things off with the GPU so that you can see how we all started. I already ended up fixing this one because I got the idea after I bought it and fixed it. So this used to be an Asus Dual RX 580 with 8 gigs of VRAM. I mean, technically it still is. But essentially what happened is the PCB plastic shroud that held the fans in was broken. So I removed that, and all the thermal paste on the GPU die as well as on the memory was very old, very crusty, and need to be replaced. So after doing a little bit of that and fixing our cooling solution by zip tying the fans onto the cooler, we had ourselves our GPU, which is this RX 580, to kick things off. Now we'll get to kind of the meat and potatoes, and the one that I had to go through a couple of CPUs in order to get one that was not working or having issues that would at least post. So I got this little i5 8500. I'll see if I can have my webcam pick it up. It won't because it's terrible. But I got this i5 8500, 6 cores, 6 threads. It says it has a base clock of 3 gigahertz, and I know it can boost much higher into the high 3, low 4 gigahertz range, which is going to be nice in some of the games that we're going to be testing here. Obviously, we need a motherboard to plug it into, so I went on eBay and I looked around for a motherboard that would meet my criteria, and essentially I was looking for one that had bent pins or something like that, something that like I know I can fix. Although I will say I need to get a motherboard cover for this because they just put a piece of paper, which is not great. But I ended up getting this B365 MSI mortar board for like 50 bucks. So for something that had a bent pin, I was totally willing to gamble on a nice board like this. For our RAM though, I bought a bulk of 8 sticks of silicon power RAM, and I've used this stuff before. This is like the end-all be-all stuff. This stuff's great. I got 2 sticks working out of them. 2 things I didn't get that were used were the storage, because I would not wish that upon my worst enemy to buy a used hard drive or SSD. So I picked up a 480 gig P310 M.2 drive from Patriot. Just something simple, small, just to hold the games on. This is a budgeted zombie build. So, and for the cooler, I had this up here, low profile cooler I was going to do for an ITX build sitting around. But, you know, it's the only cooler I had available that would work for this socket. So this is what we're going to be using for our cooler, just because I didn't have anything else sitting around and I totally forgot to buy a CPU cooler on eBay. So that's what we're working with. This is going to be the really interesting one. I got this one. This was an 850 watt, 80 plus gold power supply from Gimax. Now this one scares me a lot. So I said that I wouldn't wish used M.2 drives or SSDs or hard drives on my worst enemy. This I also would not wish on my worst enemy, because this might break our whole system. And at first I thought, oh, 850 watt, 80 plus gold, this has to be at least somewhat decent. When I tell you, I got this thing when it arrived, it scared me. Let me put the box over here, and let me show you guys this. This is the power supply. We have our normal things. We got our 24 pin right here, and we got our 8-pin CPU cable. And this is all of our connectors. Now, I don't know if you guys can see this. This is all SATA and Molex, which means we don't have anything. And in the box, unless I moved it, here we are, is our prime candidate, how we're gonna power our graphics card. Because the keen-eyed among you are going, how are you gonna do it? We're gonna use a SATA to 6-pin, which doesn't work. So I bought a 2 SATA to 8-pin adapter because the power supply I bought is very sketchy. So this thing might murder this system again. And I don't know if I'll be able to bring it back this time. I have tested most of these components individually just to see that they boot up, but I don't know if they're all gonna work together. So I'm gonna put it all together and I will get back to you guys with the PC and the results for the games we played. And I'm back. Now, we have the zombie PC put together. And now it's time to go over all of the benchmarks and see how good is this PC for bringing everything back from the dead. Except we got one little itty bitty problem. We had one culprit that ended up having some issues. Our power supply. Now, I would have loved to have told you it just didn't work, it didn't start, and that was the end of it. Oh no, it started. We got our adapters all hooked up. We got 2 Molex to an 8-pin, we're plugged in, got everything installed, got drivers, got our games. All right, we're gonna start benchmarking. Our first game we play, I am 5 minutes into our first match. I'm benchmarking Dead by Daylight. And at the corner of my eye, I see a little flash, I hear zzz, and a loud pop sound. Yep, our power supply exploded in glorious fashion. Now obviously, I unplugged everything, turned it all off, made sure we were okay, we didn't have a fire, we were good. And prayed that all the rest of my components were still okay. So luckily I had a spare power supply sitting around that was for a different build that I ended up putting in there. It's an old 650 watt 80 plus bronze power supply that was supposed to go in a different PC, but because that's the only thing I had on hand at the time and I still wanted to see what the other components could do, I decided to put it in there just so we could test everything else and try to have the rest of the video go smoothly. So once I installed the power supply, we were all good to go. So we ended up testing 4 different games. We started with Dead by Daylight, and I'll start by throwing up a little bit of footage here. Dead by Daylight, overall, it's a pretty easy game to run. At Ultra, we were averaging in the 80 FPS range, about 80 FPS, and our 1% lows were in about the 60 FPS range, dropping into maybe the high 50s occasionally. We had one drop into the 42 FPS range, but overall, it was a very smooth gaming experience. Dropping the settings down to high, we were at 103 FPS with 87 FPS 1% lows. At medium, we were at 118 with 90 FPS 1% lows. And when we put it down to low, we were averaging about that 119, 120 FPS mark where the engine cap is at, with our 1% lows going to 106. Overall, a very good experience, and even on Ultra, it was still a nice experience overall and a smooth gaming experience that I would recommend as well. For the second game we played, I threw up Marvel Rivals, and we started at Ultra. I did put on a little bit of upscaling. I put on FSR and I put on performance mode because I wanted to make sure we could get as much performance as we could out of this hardware. The last time I tested Marvel Rivals, I did it without it, and it was a very rough experience. So I decided to put on upscalers just to give it its very best shot this time, because without it, it was a little bit rough. So starting things off at 1080p ultra settings, we were averaging about 42 FPS, and our 1% lows were at 32. Dropping our graphics down to high, we were at 49 FPS with 37 FPS lows. At medium, we were averaging about 56 FPS with 43 FPS 1% lows. And at low, we're averaging 67 FPS, with our 1% lows being 51 FPS. Overall, even at ultra and high, it wasn't a terrible experience. It wasn't fantastic, but it wasn't awful. And at low and medium, I started paying so much attention to actually trying to play the game that I kind of forgot I was benchmarking a little bit, even though I'm not very good at Marvel Rivals, as you can see probably by my footage. But it was a solid experience overall and wasn't bad. I thought it was a nice balance of hardware between CPU and GPU that really made it all come together. The third game we benchmarked was Helldivers 2. And once again, I did put on upscalers. I put on performance. I didn't put on ultra performance just because I thought it looked really bad. Even on performance, everything looks very kind of mushy and cloudy a little bit. But once you're kind of in game, it doesn't look too bad. It smoothed out the game a lot more and made it very playable. So at 1080p ultra settings, we're averaging about 48 FPS with 37 FPS lows. Not too bad, wasn't great, and was hoping for a little bit more performance, but can't expect too much. At high settings, we were at 56 FPS with 51 FPS, 1% lows. Overall, a super consistent experience. I barely saw it drop from the low 50s. I think I saw maybe 48 at one point, but overall, it was a very smooth experience. Moving things to medium, we were averaging about 68 FPS with our 1% lows being 60 FPS. Super smooth. Honestly, I was more focused on playing the game. And at low, we're at 93 FPS with 75 FPS, 1% lows. So if you're playing low, medium, and you're putting it on performance mode, you're going to get some decent frame rate and a smooth gaming experience overall, and it's what I like to see. Helldivers really makes it so you can play on some more budget level hardware with their games and gives them an opportunity to play the game well, which I like to see. The fourth game we played, I didn't so much benchmark it. I just kind of jumped into a 7 Days to Die world. And the only reason I really wanted to do this is I wanted to do a zombie game. So I decided for the zombie PC, I decided to throw us into a zombie game. So I played a few minutes of 7 Days to Die, and overall it was pretty smooth. We were at max 1080p settings, max graphics. We were averaging about 60 FPS, dropping into the 50s occasionally. But overall, it was a pretty good gaming experience. Obviously, I just kind of jumped in and messed around. I'll probably throw up the footage here of me getting into a fist fight with a couple of zombies here. But it was a fun experience, and if I was playing the game at 1080p Ultra, I would say it was a good gaming experience. And if you want to turn the graphics down a little bit to have a little bit more frame rate, very much you can do that if you want those extra frames. But overall, it's a nice game to run and a fun zombie survival apocalypse game that I've personally enjoyed playing. So, kind of wrapping this thing up, would I say doing a zombie PC or a necro build, is it worth it? I think there's certain things that make sense. For me, I didn't do used storage. I don't think it's a good idea at all. You don't know what's going to be on the drive or if it's even going to work. Likely, if it's not working or having issues, you're going to be just inheriting a not working part with those issues. Same sort of thing I would say with like a CPU. If a CPU is not working, you might luck out. I did have to buy a couple other CPUs before I got to my i5-8500. I had an i5-9400F, an i5-8400. I bought an i3-8100. Overall, though, I wouldn't recommend it. It's not worth it. You're throwing money at something you can't really test. And RAM is another one, too. I bought 8 sticks of RAM, and only 2 of them worked, which is fine. But if I'm getting 25% odds with not working or untested RAM, I wouldn't take those odds. They're not very good. The motherboard, I think, is a interesting one. If you have one that is an LGA, which means the pins are on the motherboard, if you have bent pins and you're very delicate and you're willing to attempt to, I don't think it's a bad idea. You can bend the pins back, you can fix it, and I think you can save a lot of money that way. The power supply. Obviously, don't do what I did. Don't get a cheap power supply. Obviously, a rating matters, but what matters more is a reliable brand. And a weird thing to say, kind of the weight of the power supply. I could tell I didn't have a ton of confidence in this power supply because it felt really light. This thing weighs barely a couple pounds. I don't even think this thing weighs like 5 pounds. It is super light, And I'll be honest, when I bought this, it said 850 watts, 80 plus gold. I didn't believe this thing at all, but I wanted to do it for the integrity of the video. So, you know, be careful with what you're buying. I know a lot of power supplies, usually when it's 4 parts and stuff like that, a lot of times it'll be a modular or semi-modular power supply that's missing cables. So as long as it has the cables you need for your system, I don't think it's a bad idea to go for it. You can save tons of money. I've seen some really good ones for like 20 or 30 bucks just because they're missing some cables. And as long as it has the cables you need for your build, I think it's a great way to save some money. But otherwise, not a good investment. Obviously, don't buy a cheap one that's untested or a not working one. It just doesn't make any sort of sense to do. And finally, the graphics card. The graphics card's a tricky one. There's a lot of different things that can go wrong on it. When I found mine, I kind of look for ones that look like they're in okay shape. I don't see any immediate damage to the pins or the PCB if I can see them. Those are kind of some initial indicators. I also try to look around the card. Are there any cracks or breaks anywhere? Anything I can see, obviously. On the I/O for the graphics card, you know, is it weathered away? Do I see any stains anywhere from a leak? Those are kind of some initial things that I look for. Or if the person selling it is saying that the card's overheating a lot, then for me, I would say, hey, that might be a good opportunity for me. If they say the card's overheating, I can dismantle it. I can put on some, you know, take the old thermal paste and thermal pads off. I can put on some new thermal paste and thermal pads for cheap and get a fantastic graphics card for a great price. That's what I did with my RX 580. And although I'll put up a picture of it, it's a little rough. I still got it into working condition and it did a fantastic job. It played the games great and it's everything I'd hoped for. And kind of wrapping this thing up, I'll throw up a couple of pictures of the zombie PC, having it turned on and turned off, just so you guys can kind of see what it looked like when it was working. And I thought this was a fun experience for me. I learned a lot. Obviously I blew up a power supply and luckily didn't break anything else. But it was a really fun experience for me. I think that there is something to be said for looking at used or not working parts. If you can see that, you know, certain people, they didn't try certain things, or on higher end graphics cards, if they have a dual BIOS switch, that, you know, that might be something you can gamble on, that maybe just one of the BIOSes is corrupted. Stuff like that, where if you have a keen eye and you know what you're looking for, the 4 parts or not working market is a gold mine, potentially. If you know what you're looking for, you can save quite a bit of money. And it was just a fun experience overall for me, testing out some of this budget hardware and having a Necro Zombie PC. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please hit that like button. If you didn't, feel free to hit the dislike button. Totally understand. If you guys are enjoying my content, I'd really appreciate if you guys could hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon so you guys are getting notifications when these videos are going up. And if you guys can leave some comments for some video ideas, I already have obviously a couple new ones through these next couple weeks in the works. But if you guys have some great suggestions, I would love to hear them. And I would love to start working on some of those videos that you guys would love to see. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys have a fantastic Halloween coming up. All right, guys, I'll see you next week. Later.